right, welcome to AKPsi's webinar, The Ritual of AKPsi, What It Is and Why It Matters. I'm Mackenzie Lalka, and I serve AKPsi as the Associate Director of Education. I'll be moderating the webcast today. So before we dive into the content, just a few housekeeping details. All participants have been started muted and with their video turned off. We are going to ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation so we can hear the presenter, but if you'd like to turn your video on so the presenter and other participants can see you, you may choose to do so. We do have the chat feature available to you so you can interact with other attendees and the presenter. When posting, it is going to share your name, but consider also mentioning your chapter or university if you would like to do so. At the end of the presentation, we'll have a brief Q&A where you can either submit your questions via the chat feature, or at that point, if you'd like to ask your question verbally, you can go ahead and either click the raise hand button and we'll unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question verbally. So for our program today, we do have past president Mike Dickerson, and he's going to talk about the ritual. So at this point, I will go ahead and hand it over to Mike.
All right, thanks, Mackenzie, and thanks everyone for being on the webinar today. I realize for a lot of people that's final exam time, so I imagine a lot of you will be watching this during the recording. What we're going to talk about today is different than what I presented on a couple weeks ago, which was how to execute a virtual ritual. Today we'll be discussing the basis of the ritual, what it is and why it matters to AKPsi, and why it differentiates us from other Greek organizations. So, start off, what is the ritual? The ritual, the term can mean a couple different things. When you say the ritual AKPsi, you're talking about the book that you see on the screen in front of you, but also the conglomeration of traditions and history and norms that we have in the organization. But really what the ritual is at the most basic level is the one thing that every AKPsi chapter and member goes through that's the same across the board. Whether you are a student at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology over in Hong Kong, or University of Manchester, Queen Mary University over in London, or anywhere in the States or Canada, the ritual should be done the same everywhere. Now, the ritual is not something that's sacrosanct. We'll talk about that a little later on, but the important thing is that chapters are following instructions in the book as they're presented, based upon the current circumstances that they're facing. Now, understand that in the current environment where no chapter is meeting in person, everyone's doing everything virtually, the fraternity has made virtual rituals possible, and we've rewritten a whole bunch of them to be done virtually. So that way everyone goes through a similar tradition. They say the same oath for becoming members. They go through a very similar graduation ceremony and officer installation ceremony, but it's not the actual in-person one that is not possible at this time. But the ritual and tradition are related, but not really the same thing. So what is tradition? Tradition are those unwritten rules. They're those things that we don't really have anywhere that is written down or approved by the board or anything like that. It's just something that everyone kind of knows and does. An example of a tradition in AKPsi is our fraternal handshake. That is something that is alluded to in the ritual manual. You give the confidential hand grip, but the actual hand grip itself is something that was written down a long time ago and just passed down by word of mouth and practice over the years. But keep in mind, the tradition changes over time. Remember, when AKPsi was founded in 1904, it was a white male Christian only organization, only open to business majors and only open in America. But over the past 115 years plus, we have opened the doors to everyone. Tradition changes. Just because you've done something one way for a certain amount of time doesn't mean it's the same going forward. The ritual has kept up. And so we are now on the 10th edition of the ritual of AKPsi. Now, one thing that a lot of older alumni are really focused on is how things have changed over the years. But what we want to do in the fraternity is make sure that what we're doing from a ritualistic sense, a lowercase r ritualistic sense, is keeping up with the times and making us as inclusive as possible. So aside from a few grammatical changes, this is the first significant update to the ritual since 2006. And the change that happened then was the removal of the term nationals and a couple of the older risk management issues that were in the older ritual that has since been updated. So if you imagine 2006 to 2010, it was about a 4-year gap, but it was actually much longer than that. The ritual holistically was updated back in the early 1990s. In this ritual, the new one, midterm interviews and the final interview were removed from the ritual as they're not part of the Bridge of Brotherhood. They're not a ritual. From a risk management standpoint, when you think about what a ritual is, it can be a conduit to risk management issues cropping up. And that's partially because it's a different environment than normal classroom environment. There's robes, there's candles, there's darkness, there's old ways of speaking in there. And it creates a power structure that we don't necessarily want people to fall into the trap of getting a little crazy about. It also should be focusing on the things that aren't purely educational. The midterm interview and the final interview are based on the Bridge of Brotherhood, which is an education-based initiation and pledging process. The ritual is something a little different, and it's not educational per se. It's more what differentiates us as an organization. With the recognition that we are an international fraternity, we are in 4 countries with student chapters and in a couple dozen with alumni chapters, it's important to understand that we are not a Judeo-Christian only organization anymore. We have students and alumni members who recognize follow all faiths or follow no faith at all. And because of that, to make it more inclusive, the chaplain role was removed. This is the biggest change that a lot of student chapters will see in the new ritual if you've been around for a while. Chaplain was removed, but to keep the same number, 10, it's a magic number in AKPsi, we added a role called the executive. The role of the executive is to bring together the merchant, the banker, the accountant. So about a year ago, every chapter should have gotten shipped this new ritual manual. The expectation is that every chapter follows it to the letter, and if you have questions about it or you're concerned about anything in the ritual, talk to your advisor, talk to one member of the management team or the Heritage Center staff, and they can provide you with some guidance on what to do and how to adjust. And I apologize if you hear some stuff in the background. My newborn son's playing upstairs. He's super cute, and so my wife is trying to keep him occupied while we do this. So before we get into some more of the traditions and stuff, let's discuss some quick guidelines about the ritual. 1, you got to be prompt. Things start on time. AKPsi does not mean 15 minutes late. It's on time every time. And I know that can be hard to do, but now when everyone's meeting virtually, it can be even easier to do because you don't really have to travel far or go to campus or park anywhere. But you still got to follow the same guidelines. You can't start before 7 a.m. You can't end after 11 p.m. You can't have it last longer than 8 hours. You got to have a break. You got to provide food and drink for people if they're going to be there for a long time. These are just basic rules. This is not meant to cause any kind of pain or suffering or torment. A ritual is supposed to be a memorable experience that everyone gets to have a positive impression of. Some more ritual guidelines to follow. You always use a handshake and password when entering the room. Later on, we're going to talk about how to do the handshake properly, and we're going to talk about how to do the password properly. Because this is being recorded, I'm not going to describe explicitly what those are, but we're talking about how to do them. And when we talk about a dimly lit room, if you have to really light the walkway using flashlights and you can't see without them, the room's too dark. Yes, it's a ritual. It's designed to be done in a solemn way, but not designed to be done in a dangerous way. And the master rituals, which we'll discuss in a few minutes, their job is to manage all logistics for the event. So they have to start planning well ahead of time. You cannot plan a proper ritual the day of. It is not possible. And please remember, we're all adults. If someone has to take a bio break or a personal break, or for whatever reason they need to leave the room, let them. It's okay. This goes for business meetings. I go to work. If someone has to leave the room for the restroom, I have never seen a situation where someone says, no, sit down, you can't do that. So keep in mind, these are all adults and they're supposed to be your brothers too. So we talked about the guidelines. Let's discuss the 6 rituals that a chapter does. These are the rituals that you will focus on most of the time during your undergrad experience. There are some other rituals that are done outside of the chapter experience, and all but one are in the ritual manual. However, these are the ones you'll focus on. Pledge induction and initiation of student members, the 2 ones that a chapter will do almost all the time every semester. Pledge induction in the beginning, initiation in the end of the semester. Please don't mix up the terms. One of the things that I'll mention during this presentation is terminology and nomenclature. Induction is when you become a pledge. Initiation is when you become a member. Installation is when you become an officer. Initiation faculty members is another ritual that chapters do, and you really should do this more often than I think a lot of chapters think about. It's super easy to do. It's a public ritual. It's a way to get your foot in the door into business school and to get more support from the administration, and also to show to potential members that you are a professional organization. Initiation honor members is the same thing. The ritual is basically the same for these 2. In fact, it actually is the same. However, the threshold for becoming a faculty brother or an honorary member are different. For a faculty member, you need to be a member of the faculty or staff of a university that the chapter's at and have provided some sort of support to the chapter, and the chapter decides who those members are. For an honorary membership, this actually requires the approval of fraternity president. It's a much higher bar to become an honorary member of Alpha Kappa Psi than a faculty member. So if you want someone to become one of these two types of members, plan ahead, at least 2 or 3 weeks, because we need to make sure in normal times that there's a chance for the certificate and the pin to get to the chapter in time. Now everyone's meeting virtually. That will happen at some point in the future and everything's back to normal. Installation of officers is one of the virtual rituals that we have done now. I'm currently a chapter advisor at Langland New and at American University in DC. We did the officer installation a couple weeks ago. It went really smoothly. The only thing we really couldn't do in person was physically hand the gavel from the outgoing president to the incoming president, but it worked. And finally, the graduation to seniors ceremony. Now, right now, the fraternity is doing these virtually. You probably see it on social media that Thomas or Jackie or Eileen or Eliza, they're pairing off and doing, I think it's 4 graduation ceremonies for a bigger people at one time. So remember, when you do the process into being an alumni member, you are graduating AKPsi. You're not demitting. If you say, I'm demitting Alpha Kappa Psi, you're saying, I'm quitting. Demit means to quit. So call it what it is. You are graduating, becoming an alumni member of Alpha Kappa Psi. Now getting into more of the traditional stuff and some of the symbolism. So Alpha Kappa Psi rituals do have robes, and the robes matter, and the robes mean something. So the president's robe is a gold robe with a full color coat of arms in white trim and a gold belt. Now, the picture has the wrong color belt on it. That's okay. It's just an example. But when you're tying the belt on the robes, you want to try to do your best to tie it around and then loop it alternatingly so you have 4-link chain showing the Brooklyn 4 on your robe. The Master Rituals robe is the opposite of the President's robe. It's a white robe with gold trim and a white and gold coat of arms on it. Notice how I'm not calling it a crest. AKPsi doesn't have a crest. We have a coat of arms. We're one of the few Greek organizations in the world to have a coat of arms designed and approved and cataloged with the Army Institute of Heraldry. So our coat of arms actually means something. There are 7 blue robes that are gold trimmed with a blue and gold belt in the ritual trunk. You'll notice that there are asterisks next to the President and Master Rituals and the Warden. That's because every chapter has these positions already existing, and these are the people that need to fill these particular roles during rituals. The other roles are up to the Master Rituals to decide who fills them: the merchant, the banker, the accountant, the guards, the guide. And finally, the executive. So the executive is the old chaplain. To save money and be more efficient, the executive's robe is the chaplain's robe, which is a black robe with a black belt. However, in place of the white stole with the Christian Bible on it, there's now the gold stole with the Alpha Kappa Psi coat of arms on it. And the executive speaks during the initiation ritual. And these are what the symbols are. So let's talk about the symbols for a minute and what they mean. President MOR are pretty self-explanatory. It's a coat of arms of Alpha Kappa Psi. The warden is a scroll, which is part of the coat of arms. It says Alpha Kappa Psi. That's because the warden is responsible for making sure that those who are attending the ritual are indeed true members of Alpha Kappa Psi. They should have the scroll of names. The executive we just talked about, it's the gold stole with the Alpha Kappa Psi coat of arms on it. This represents leadership, and you'll see when you go to convention in Miami that when a new president or existing president is installed, they will get a gold stole because that is part of the symbolism for leadership. The merchant, the banker, the accountant are described to you in the initiation ceremony as what the coat of arms symbols are: the Phoenician galley, the coin bag, and the scales, representing those 3 areas of commerce. The front guard is a 10-pointed star, representing the Brooklyn 4, the 10 founders, but also because the front guard in the ritual lights the way for the pledges as they go through and they sign the Master Scroll Book and they get their pin. The rear guard is the 4-link chain representing the Brooklyn 4, whose goal is to keep the pledges all together. So the guards are guards are at the front and back of the line. The guide's symbol is actually the old coat of arms of Alpha Kappa Psi. Notice it's missing Knight of Brotherhood, it's missing some of the flourishes around it. This is because the guide has been around since the beginning, and it incorporates the different parts of their part of the ritual into their symbol. So these are the symbols for the robes. It's really easy to find the President MOR and executive robes because they're different colors, but the 7 blue robes, look at the symbols. Let's talk about the MOR for a second. So when you say, oh, who personifies my chapter? Who personifies Alpha Kappa Psi? There's 2 answers. The president of the organization or president of the chapter is supposed to represent the organization as a whole, administratively. This is the person that is the point of contact and the spokesman for the organization. The Master Rituals is supposed to be the personification of brotherhood, of unity, of what makes us unique. When you say to the president, you're the member I want to be, you say to the Master Rituals, you're the brother I want to be. The Master Rituals has a very, very short job description in the governing documents. Basically, it's to run the rituals. It sounds like it's not a big deal, but there's a lot of logistics involved. And for people who want to become Masters of Rituals in chapters, think about the project management skills you're going to learn as you're planning all these events. It's a lot of work ahead of time and a lot of day of coordination. And Master Ritual is also responsible for getting the room set up properly. So when you are looking at the room sizes, you need to figure out how big your chapter is, how big your incoming class is, and what the difference in that size will be when everyone's in the same room at the same time. For an initiation ritual, for example, if you pair it with Court of Honor, which is not a ritual but still part and attached to it, you might need 4 or 5 rooms to do it properly. When everyone's in the same room, there is a setup that's involved, and the ritual manual has these in there. On the screen right now, you'll see 2 examples of how a room is set up, and the symbols are from the robes on, we talked about the slide ago, so you can see where the people sit. But the point is that it's supposed to be done in a certain way, but you gotta be kind of flexible. And a room setup is where some of the flexibility in the ritual can actually come into it. If you as a Master of Rituals are trying to get a room set up and you just do not have the space to do it the way that's normally done, you need to be more flexible and say, okay, here's how we're gonna do it, get it organized in this way, and just stay calm, make sure it's done properly. You'll also notice that there is a processional, and that's indicated by the dashed lines on the image on the left. I have never seen a chapter, except for one, do this properly. And it's really impressive when it's done, but usually it can't be done properly because of space constraints. So before we go on, I have a question from Josh. As I understand it, robes should only be worn in the ritual room. To that end, who actually brings in the pledges before turning them over to the guides? It's a great question, Josh, and you're right. Robes are not worn outside the room. So you should have someone who is not wearing a robe go get the pledges, bring them to the room, and then come inside. The guide and the warden are at the door, but they don't actually leave the room. Now, an alternative can be the guide can go get them and bring them in and then put the robe on when they get into the room. But you don't want to leave the room with the robes on. Not because they're secret, because they're not secret. We only have 3 secret things in AKPsi, but because you don't want people to be like, what the heck is going on over there with this random person walking around the business school on a Sunday afternoon in a robe? So that's a great question. The altar is also set up in a very specific way, and it's meant to help with the flow of the actual signing of it. When you're doing a ritual, and there's a different webinar that talks about the execution of a ritual, we'll talk about how to do it properly. But the point is that the symbolism on the altar matters. You have the jewel badge, you have the coat of arms, you also have the Master Scroll, which can be kept by the chapter, and everyone needs to sign the Master Scroll twice, when they're inducted as a pledge and when they're initiated as a brother. That scroll is kept for as long as the chapter is in existence, and it's kind of neat to go back and look at it. But what's really cool about the Master Scroll book is it's a really easy way to bring alumni back into the fold. When you have an event where alumni come back, like a homecoming or a ritual or a yellow rose banquet or a blue sapphire ball, you can have that there. You can bring it out of the ritual trunk and say, hey, listen, you were the fall in 1984. Check out your name in the book. And they go, oh, I remember that time. And then they all of a sudden have a connection to the current chapter. This is another example of how the ritual bridges gaps between generations. With very few exceptions, the ritual has been pretty much constant, the initiation ritual especially, over the years. The change of adding the executive was a big change. The change of the oath back in 2005, 2006, from requiring you to be a business major to any major, was another big change, but pretty much the oath stayed the same for over a century. So think about that. When you have alumni coming back, they've gone through the same ritual that you as current members have as well. Now we're going to talk about some of the secrets and proper terminology in AKPsi. Now, there are only 3 actual secret things in AKPsi. Let me preface this by saying when I say secret, I mean it's not something that we advertise. You're not going to see us write down this is what this means on akpsi.org. However, nothing is secret from the university. So if a member of the staff or faculty or whoever say, hey, I want to see your ritual, I want to see your books, absolutely, yes, let them. Every chapter is a guest on the university's campus, and we do not want to run afoul of them by saying, no, you can't see what we're doing, because the first thing they're going to do is think you're a Greek organization, you're keeping secrets from us, therefore you're doing something bad. So Alpha Kappa Psi has a handshake. The handshake is designed to be so subtle that to the average observer, they wouldn't know what's happening. But to any other observer, they would have to look really, really closely to see what's going on there. And to a member of Alpha Kappa Psi, they know what to do and how to do it without trying to do anything weird, like moving fingers in and out of each other. Remember, you're taught the handshake when you are initiated, and you should be doing it every time you meet any brother. With the caveat that during the current times, understanding the handshake is not something that people do right now, and that's okay. We have a password in Alpha Kappa Psi, and there are two uses for the password. One is when you're entering an Alpha Kappa Psi event that is being held, a chapter meeting or a ritual that's already in progress. Another is in your email signature blocks. Without saying what the password is on this webinar, the password is properly written in U -- and AND or ampersand I -- not dots, not spaces, it's -- That's just how it is. When doing the password, the person approaching the room gives the first part, and the person guarding the door gives the second part. If it was the opposite, the person who's guarding the door will be giving away half the password to the person who is approaching. So when you come to the door, you say the first part, and the person guarding the door gives the second part. That's how the password's done properly. We have a motto. That's another secret thing in Alpha Kappa Psi. It's what the AKPsi, I look at my shirt, stands for, and that's told to you by the president of the chapter when you are initiated as a member. It is an incredibly rough Greek translation of Alpha Kappa Psi into English and then Greek. We have robes and belts, but notice these are not marked with an asterisk because they're not secrets. The symbolism of the coat of arms and the symbolism of the jewel badge is secret, lowercase s secret, that's told to you when you're initiated. The robes themselves are not secret. What that means is please get them dry cleaned professionally. Don't try to clean them yourself. They're made of material that will melt very easily if you try to iron them. So, what does Alpha Kappa Psi not have? There is a lot of consternation about some of these things, but we do not have local chapter rituals. Rituals are done only by the ritual manual that's approved by the board of directors. That's it. Local chapters can have traditions, which is different than a ritual, but local chapters are not supposed to have rituals. That is not proper. The Constitution says you follow the ritual as is, no more, no less, unless you have a waiver from the board or university won't allow you to do a certain part of it, and they just let the board and the Heritage Center staff know. We don't have hand signs. Alpha Kappa Psi does not have a hand sign. That's official. Some chapters will put it in their social media. There's no prohibition against it, but as a fraternity, we do not have a hand sign. We also don't use incorrect terms. We don't have a crest. We talked about that earlier. We have a coat of arms. That's different than a crest. We don't have nationals. Interesting fact, a lot of people think Alpha Kappa Psi became international in 2005 when the chapter Congress changed the terminology, removed nationals from our documents. But actually, in 1931, at the University of Western Ontario, we opened the Beta Kappa chapter. So Alpha Kappa Psi has been international since the 1930s. We only get rid of nationals about 70 years later, but we are not nationals. Don't call the Heritage Center nationals. It's not. It's the Heritage Center. We also don't demit. Demit means to quit. You graduate into alumni status, but you demit if you quit and give back your pin and membership certificate. And we don't cross. Yes, welcome to the threshold is a line in the initiation ritual, but you're not crossing the threshold. You're not getting married in Alpha Kappa Psi. You don't cross into the organization. You get initiated. That's how it works. Some organizations have these terms, and that's totally fine, but they're not Alpha Kappa Psi. We are. We have our own terminology. We have our own traditions, and it's important for us to maintain that over the years. If social norms require us to change our ritual and our traditions, we definitely do that. But for the time being, there's no need to have these terms in organization because that's not who we are over the past century plus. So to sum up, the ritual is a very specific thing that we have as chapters and as a fraternity that we all follow to the letter. And it's the thing that unites us across the entire world. It's the only thing that's done the same way, the same time, every time by everyone. And that's what makes us different from the accounting society or the econ club. It's what makes us an actual Greek fraternity. The secrets and traditions of the fraternity are what make us special. And it's important for every member of AKPsi to ensure that those secrets and those traditions are upheld and maintained across the generations. Right now, it's very, very hard in the time of a quarantine and of COVID. When we come back at some point, hopefully in the fall, when things are opening back up again, there's going to be additional ceremonies and rituals that are promulgated down to the chapters to reignite the passion that people might not have had doing everything virtually over the spring semester and over the summer. Those rituals matter, and what we do as an organization matters, and these traditions matter, and that's what will keep us going into the future. So with that, I will open up for any Q&A you all may have.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Mike, for sharing the presentation. And as mentioned earlier, if you have questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll ask them to Mike, or if you want to just unmute yourself and ask your question verbally, you can go ahead and do that. Let's start off with the first question here. So especially if somebody's been in the chapter for several semesters, they've gone through a lot of rituals, it might be easy for them to kind of just get in this habit of it's normal, they've done it. What can chapters do to kind of keep that feeling that there is meaning and value behind the ritual for all their members?
It's a great question. So you remember when we talked about the robes, there are a lot of positions that the MOR can pick who gets to fill those roles. Traditionally, the MOR has picked senior brothers or those brothers who've been around a long time and represent the longevity and success of the chapter to fill those roles and represent being the merchant or one of the guards to the incoming pledges. It's a way to say, listen, you matter and your experience matters. And the fact you've been here, you've seen this done before, is important to show people how it's supposed to be done. So a really easy way is to give them a role in a ritual.
So another question we have, Mike. So you talked about a little bit about like we have virtual rituals right now. If for some reason they're not able to do them in person, what are some things that they can do to kind of keep that spirit of the ritual alive?
Another good question. So with the understanding that most people don't have access to the ritual trunk, and even if the MOR did have the trunk, the other people involved in ritual don't, making sure that people take it seriously is a big thing. This is available electronically. All the virtual rituals are available over email from the CERCs to the chapters when they need them. Practicing ahead of time matters. Taking it seriously, not laughing or giggling while you're reading your parts is important. And speaking with emphasis, speaking slowly and having a good cadence is one way to show people that this is important. It's not just something we're doing for the sake of doing it. And yeah, dressing up is good, but another way to do it is make sure whoever's on a ritual and being part of it is wearing something AKPsi, even if it's just a t-shirt with letters on it, to show that, hey, we're all together, we're all here virtually, but we're all still in the same chapter.
All right, another thing you kind of touched on. So a lot of times when you say the ritual, people might just assume the initiation ritual. What are some things that chapters can do to kind of put some emphasis and meaning behind the other rituals we talked about?
So making them milestones and important things in the chapter's calendar is a big deal. So you're right. A lot of people just put all the emphasis on the initiation because that's the only ritual in the entire book that uses everything in the trunk, all 10 robes, the master scroll, the altar, the whole shebang. But the other rituals matter just as much. So let's assume everyone was back on campus and everyone was able to be in the same room at the same time and everyone was healthy. Emphasizing attendance and emphasizing decorum is incredibly important. Reminding people that you're representing the history and traditions of the organization to the incoming pledges or incoming faculty or honorary brothers is a big deal. Just like any volunteer or board member or staff member represents the bigger organization to a local chapter, the chapter members represent the whole organization to those incoming new members. And if everyone understands that you represent Alpha Kappa Psi, help drill it into their head that what you do makes a difference and how you act in a ritual makes a difference. There is the part of most rituals where the president will say, no eating, no drinking, no smoking, no cell phones, yada, 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 in the very beginning, but enforcing that matters. You don't want to have a lot of negative reinforcement, like fines or anything, because that doesn't really get people to want to do stuff. But teaching them the tradition, the history will help them understand that this is cool and unique and what makes us different from a general business club.
All right, not seeing any other questions. Mike, do you have any final last thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, so one of the things I've been passionate about in my nearly 20 years in Alpha Kappa Psi is the ritual. I think tradition and history matter. I think they need to be adjusted with the times. And I think the ritual is something that, if done properly, can be memorable for everyone across their decades in the fraternity. If it's taken seriously and executed well, a well-run ritual will be something that someone remembers for the rest of their life.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. So before we close out, just one last thank you to Mike Dickerson for his time and everything he shared with us today. And thank you all for logging in and joining us. Just a quick reminder, make sure you guys log into the My AKPsi community where you can engage with other members in the collaboration groups and register for more upcoming sessions on the events tab. So thank you all for attending, and we'll see you in the My AKPsi community.
Thank you.